Well, welcome. This is the Technique Center First podcast. I am joined today with Cassi Hall and Courtney Gragson, who are two MTs, and I am Austin Jones, your host. And I'm also an MT, believe it or not. Today we're going to be discussing about learning new languages and how they could benefit you personally and tutoring-wise. So kind of the first question I want to pose to you guys is it actually feasible to learn a new language?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's a short answer, but
Yeah.
do you want to?
So I took a couple Spanish classes in high school, but I really didn't get into my language learning until about 2 years ago. And ever since then, it's just kind of been development. So I definitely think at any age you can learn a new language, but especially whenever you're young, like it's possible 100%.
Definitely. I think, I was kind of on the same track where I learned German. I got into German in high school, but it was really just kind of like bare basics, and when I really started to pick it up was in college, and then I studied abroad for 1 semester, and then like the immersion helped some.
Yeah.
I think even without study abroad though, I mean, just having that specific time in those classes when you go in and you immerse yourself, I mean, it's feasible. If I was dropped into like a job interview, could I do it absolutely perfect? No, but my confidence, my vocabulary, my familiarity with structure is like miles above where it was in high school, and it's just through continuing to do it. I mean, it's feasible.
Yeah.
Not as easy when you're a kid, but it's not impossible.
It's still possible.
Yeah.
It definitely takes some willpower and some self-control. It's not something that you can just kind of like read a book or like listen to Spanish every other day or every other week or anything like that and know it. Like, it's something that you have to put effort towards, and it can be really difficult at times, but that's definitely, it won't stop you from learning a language.
Yeah. And some languages you actually may pick up better than others. So if you start picking up a language and it's just like not really clicking, if you try something else that may seem interesting, you might actually pick it up faster. So
Right.
just personal stuff. It's some people view it as a hobby, and it's because it's possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like through just persistence and actually wanting to do it, it sounds like this is something that's very easily done and achieved through effort. Through learning these languages through high school and your college career, working at the Technique Center, how do you think it has affected your tutoring style overall with working with your students?
Yeah, I mean, you start to think about language more, and so when you're having to function in another language, both in terms of like reading and writing and listening and speaking, you start to recognize like the functions of like your like first language. So with English, and so with tutoring, I noticed more like the type of language that I'm using, whether in English or if I'm tutoring a language. And so that part has been a great help, and also just knowing like even if I'm tutoring an English class, I can kind of help them break down the language a little bit more, because sometimes even in the language that you grew up speaking, writing it still is sometimes like learning a second language, and so knowing how to break that down because you've learned a language is really helpful.
Absolutely. Like going through the grammatical structure of like things in a different language, you like think about it in English, and you're like, how is it in English? And kind of how does it compare?
Exactly.
But I agree, it's definitely helped in that aspect. And I also think a lot of my classes have to do with like translating and kind of working around the language. So if there's something specific that you think about saying in English, sometimes it can't be directly translated into another language. And so you kind of have to find a different way around it or a different way to say things. And that's especially helpful in tutoring because a lot of the times, you explain a concept and maybe it's not understood like directly how you said it. So then you kind of have to work around it and find another way. Okay, let me see if I can explain it this way. And then that kind of helps with like students' understanding and things like that. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest ways that it's helped me in tutoring.
Definitely. Meaning is sometimes like you can use a bunch of different words and phrases to get one meaning across, and sometimes in tutoring like you have to practice that where the message didn't get across the way that you wanted it to, so how do you restructure this? How do you say it differently?
Yeah. And a lot of the times going simple is like the best way to do it. Like breaking it down, like this big word actually just means this. Like it's a bigger word for this. and it's kind of like what you have to do in language as well, like interpreting and translating.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, sounds great. Sounds like you're actually getting a lot of problem-solving skills and critical thinking skills out of learning the new language, which is something I don't think a lot of people would quite figure that's a skill you would learn. So that's awesome, and you can translate that to your tutoring sessions really well.
No pun intended.
What have you noticed is the best personal benefit for you for learning and studying new languages?
That's a good question. It's a big question. I feel like for me, one thing that's really exciting is being able to communicate with a different, like all of a sudden doors have opened for communication with this whole other group of people. And it's really interesting to kind of analyze how the language structure that you have sort of grown up in really has an influence on your perception of the world, really. And so it's really interesting to kind of, whenever you're learning a new language, you kind of see things through different eyes and just kind of like through a different filter. It's almost hard to explain because it's like there are different words and they sound different and it just influences the way you think. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is just kind of opening up doorways, gaining new perspectives. A lot of the times you can't really learn a language without learning the culture as well. And so I think that's another added bonus, is just you have all this cultural knowledge, and it's really cool to just kind of like jump into that and figure out new things, and I think that's what it would be for me.
Same. I really like what you talked about with it kind of opens doors. Because with German, the reason that, I took it in college was I was like, well, I have background in it from high school. I need 2 years of foreign language with my degree plan. Mm-hmm. So I can actually just condense that, just take like the refresher course, do study abroad. It's done in like way less than 2 years. Well, it hooked me in.
That's exactly what happened to me too.
I know, it hooked me in, and like it's one of my majors now. Mm-hmm. And I'm going into grad school for history, but my advisor also has a German-speaking background. For the area that I'm involved in, there's going to be a lot of like written German sources, and I'm already planning with my advisor like possible research trips to Germany and like
That's
using
awesome.
like their archive places. And so literally, just learning one language, like it completely changed like my research subjects, the ability that I have to research, where I can go, opportunities, and just like having that small connection to another place can allow you to like follow something that you maybe didn't really know that you were going to follow. Mm-hmm. And it kind of opens your own perspective up too, of like you said, you have to learn the culture. Language comes from how and why people communicate things, and that comes from culture. So
Right.
It's like a whole new perspective, like a whole new world essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just with one language.
Exactly.
If you start learning a bunch of others, it's a great way to connect with people.
Yeah, I agree. And I didn't know that you had the same experience with
I know, it's crazy.
Because I literally just thought, I was like, oh, I have these required language courses, and I took Spanish in high school, and so I know a little bit about that. I really didn't know anything. And I was like, you know what, I'll just study abroad, because of course you get to travel, and then you get your language credits, and that's that.
Yeah.
And then it just totally changes your world and like your interest, and you kind of end up in something where you didn't think that you would be there or have that interest. So it's really fun.
The first time I ordered stamps at a store and the clerk didn't switch into English for me, I was like, maybe I want to practice this a little bit more. I'm like, why in the progress here? That was like a thrill of ordering postage stamps and knowing what to say, and then them being completely comfortable with speaking to me in their language. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's a pipeline.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It sounds like it's a great way to open up pathways for your career or for research or whatever your interests are in, but it also sounds like it's just a really great way to connect with people. And kind of connecting with people is the first start to understanding people, and connects us and makes us more connected and happier, and it's great. Just kind of last question for you guys is, you've talked about your personal benefits and how it's affected your tutoring styles, but in terms of with your students, what would be benefits for them towards their educational career? How would learning a new language or studying a new language help them succeed in college? Or how would it help them in your tutoring sessions? What would the difference be, do you think?
I think, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, learning a new language, like on top of the language skills that you get, it's also critical thinking and kind of like, at least in my brain, kind of like analytical. Like, how do I formulate this phrase? How do I say this sentence where it's grammatically correct? So I think in terms of critical thinking, it's like learning how to work around something until you get your desired outcome. So for instance, in the classes that I have tutored for Spanish, a lot of it has been trial and error because obviously, you know, it's not easy, and you kind of just have to work around like, okay, this method didn't work. What else can we try? And so I think that's beneficial, one in tutoring, but also just for students in general. If you have those skills, then it's kind of helpful to where you can do it independently and even unconsciously. It's just where you get to the point like, okay, this isn't working for me, so what else can I do? How can I work around it? How can I translate this differently?
Definitely. Yeah, so I think it's just the emphasis on like progress and, like you said, like problem solving skills. Like it's a focus on individuality. It's not like learn this one thing and just apply it to everything. It's like, well, it's your message. How do you want to get it across? Like, what skills do you have to do that? So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. And a lot of the times, like, I really like what you mentioned about like the focus on progress, because it's kind of refreshing as well. Because I mean, if you think about it, how many times do you correctly get your message across in English, your native language? Like, that doesn't always happen, and so sometimes that's not going to happen in the second language that you're learning. So even then, like, you still are capable, and it's kind of, it really helps whenever you, like, with the confidence, and just even with like regular tasks like writing essays or anything of that nature. And it's kind of like, I want to get the perfect words and like describe. I'm having trouble speaking. Like, just getting your message across clearly, it really helps with going around that and just thinking of like, what's another way to think about this? How can I say this in a different way that still like communicates what I wanted to say? Exactly. So.
Yeah. No, it's great. It sounds like learning or even just studying a new language in classes promotes a lot of what we promote at the TC in terms of independent learning and individuality, and how it creates those problem solving skills, those critical thinking skills. Really beneficial for all of our students, and so that's awesome. It sounds like all of our students should be learning, all of our students and tutors should be studying and learning new languages. So
we should all learn a new language.
It would make the TC a more interesting place for sure.
For sure.
Everyone's speaking.
We'll start your
a different
lessons right after this.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Cassie and Courtney, for joining me today, and then thank you to those who are listening for joining with us on our first podcast for the Technique Center.